All right, before we get started, let's make sure that you have installed Heroku CLI properly. So here in the terminal, run Heroku --version. So I'm using Heroku 6.13.0. Perfect. Now we need to log in. So Heroku, login. Here you need to add your email and password. Okay, so you can see I'm successfully logged in. Now we need to create a new Heroku app. So Heroku, create. We can give it a name here, but this name has to be unique. Alternatively, we can just leave the name and Heroku CLI will automatically generate a random name. So this is the name of my application, nameless-harbor-this number. And this is the address of our application on Heroku. So you can simply copy paste this into Chrome, or easier, you can run Heroku open. And this automatically opens this address in Chrome. So this is our Heroku app. Now we want to replace this with our Angular app. So let's go to package.json. I want you to pay great attention here and follow the steps exactly as I'm doing. If you miss a step, chances are you're going to get an error and you're going to get frustrated. So when we deploy our application, Heroku is going to look at this package.json. It's going to look under these dependencies and it's going to install all of these with npm. At this point, we want to build our application using Angular CLI on Heroku. Now, Angular CLI is one of the dev dependencies. So it's here. Heroku is not going to install this. So by default, we cannot build our application using Angular CLI on Heroku. To fix this issue, we need to move Angular CLI to the dependencies node. So I'm going to take this here. I'm also going to take compiler CLI because we need this for ahead of time compilation. When we supply the prod flag, Angular CLI is going to use Angular compiler to pre-compile our application, right? So let's move these two dependencies right here. Now this Angular compiler is built on top of TypeScript compiler. So as another dependency, we should also move TypeScript. So here under dev dependencies, we have TypeScript. Let's cut this, remove this comma, and move TypeScript here. Okay, so now we have the proper dependencies. Heroku is going to install all of these. Now we need to build our application. How? Very easy. So in the script section, we're going to add a post install script. So post install. This is a reserved script and it's run automatically after all these dependencies are installed. So here we need to execute ng build -- prod. Okay. At this point, our front end is ready. Now let's go back to this server.js that I showed you a minute ago. So here we're importing Express. Express is a framework for building web applications on Node. So because on the backend we're using Express, we need to add this as a dependency to package.json as well. So back in the terminal, npm install express -- save. All right, beautiful. Now the last step. In the script section, we need to change the start script. And instead of serving this Angular application, we need to start our Node server. So we should run Node and as an argument, give it server.js. So Node is going to run this server.js, which is our web server. The job of this web server is to host our static content and expose any API endpoints. Let's have a quick look here. So server.js. Look, on the top, we're importing Express, which is our framework. We call it like a function, and this gives us an app object. On this line, on line 5, we're telling this app object to host our static content from the dist folder. This is where we store our built Angular application, right? Now here we don't have any API endpoints, but in your application, you will be adding your API endpoints here. Maybe you have a couple of API endpoints, or you may have a complex application. Then instead of adding all your API endpoints in server.js, you may have a folder like server. And in that folder, for each API endpoint, you're going to have a separate JavaScript file, like courses.js, messages.js, and so on. So you register all your API endpoints, and in your handlers, you simply use a database like Mongo or whatever to get or save the data. Now, after that, here on line 9, we're catching all the invalid routes. So for any other routes, we're going to send this index.html to the client. And this is for solving the same problem we had when deploying our application to Firebase. So earlier I showed you that when you refresh the followers page, by default, you're going to get a 404 error. So in the Firebase lecture, we implemented a URL rewrite to redirect the client to index.html. And at this point, our Angular application kicks in and then navigates the user to the followers page. So these few lines is exactly for the same reason. And finally, on line 13, we're listening on the environment port, which is often 80, or if it's not supplied, 8080. So this is a simple backend implementation. Now we're ready to deploy our application. First, we need to commit our changes to Git. So git add, and then git commit. Let's say prepare for Heroku. Now, when we create an app using Heroku CLI, so Heroku create, this Heroku CLI registers a remote for this Git repository. Let me show you. So git remote. Look, we have two remotes here. One is Heroku, the other is origin. So every time we want to deploy our application, all we have to do is to push our changes to Heroku. At this point, Heroku has a continuous deployment process. It kicks in, it checks out all the latest code from that repository. It's going to build our application, it's going to install all the dependencies and run the node server. Let's see this in action. So git push Heroku master. All right, our application is deployed successfully. Now let's have a look. Heroku, open. And this is our Angular app. Let's go to the followers page. Beautiful. Let's refresh this page. We don't get a 404 error. So this is how you deploy an application to Heroku.